We need to talk. It's been a rough ride. From a culture bent on burning itself down to attacks from within. But by the grace of God, we've been given a moment, a chance to make lasting changes. We can rebuild what's been torn down, but we have to build with what will last, the gospel of the kingdom. This April, let's sit down. Let's talk about what matters. And together, we'll build something that lasts. ReformCon 2025. Tickets are limited. Lord willing, we'll see you in Tucson.
Non-rockabotus must stop. I don't want to rock the boat. I want to sink it.
Are you going to bark all day, little doggy, or are you going to bite?
Brett,
delusional. I love you, Jeff.
delusional, yeah. Delusional is okay in your worldview. I'm an animal. You don't chastise chickens for being delusional. You don't chastise pigs for being delusional. So you calling me delusional using your worldview is perfectly okay. It doesn't really hurt. She hung up on me.
What?
Desperate times call for faithful men and not for careful men. The careful men come later and write the biographies of the faithful men, lauding them for their courage.
Go into all the world and make disciples. Not go into the world and make buddies. Not to make brosives.
Right.
Don't go into the world and make homies.
Right.
Disciples.
I got a bit of a jiggle neck. That's a joke, Pastor.
When we have the real message of truth, we cannot let somebody say they're speaking truth when they're not.
Take an amazing journey to a place that will blow your mind and move your heart so you will never be the same again.
Be watchful. Stand firm in the faith. Act like men. Be strong. Let all that you do be done in love. And that, of course, is 1 Corinthians 16, verse 13. Big fan of that verse.
Fitting, given the topic today.
Yes, I'm excited to get into this conversation here. What's up, everyone? Oh, sorry, were you going to say something?
I said, let's do it.
I cut you off right away.
Let's go.
That's little Caesars to my left right there.
Hey, everyone. Good to be with you today.
Excited for the show. Pastor Jeff is patiently waiting for another grandchild to be born. So I'm actually really excited the show came together literally at like 2 hours ago, I think, because we were scrambling. I'm also glad that I didn't announce last week what we were hoping to do this week.
Mm-hmm.
That
right.
would have stunk.
Right. No, it worked out. The threads came together, and we have a killer guest on today.
Killer guest.
I'm excited.
Not literally.
He's got
clear.
hidden talents too, like reciting Blackalicious lyrics,
which we just learned,
so on and so forth. So
before we started, so yes, welcome everyone. I will bring our guest on here in a second. Quickly, we have a lot going on for End Abortion Now.
Yes, we do. We are
You're like, yes.
involved right now with bills across the country of equal protection and abolition. The legislative season has started, generally goes from January to about May or so. We're involved in about 20 states, either our own efforts that God has just brought about or things that we are helping others with. South Carolina, Texas, Georgia, Ohio, Kentucky, Colorado,
North Dakota,
working on Arizona, North Dakota,
Idaho.
Idaho, a lot of different opportunities going on. God is doing amazing things in bringing the cause of justice for the preborn before legislatures and allowing us to speak prophetically to the culture with this. So you guys know you've been following this work for years now. I feel like God is advancing this cause, giving it progress, giving it further reach, and we're just grateful for all your support and everything you do to allow us to do this, because it's really special, it's significant. The church is rising up, and just happy to be a part of it still.
Yeah, and there's no excuse now for us to not accomplish something. This last legislative year in 24 was difficult because it seemed like all the Republican pro-life people were like, we can't do anything this year because we got to win the election. Like, listen, you won the election.
Yep.
So now let's put your money where your mouth is. So.
Yep. And again, the progress too is that, now you're seeing bills of equal protection filed in both House and Senate in multiple states that we're working in. Moves being made by legislators to advance it through particular committees and things like that. So a lot of exciting stuff. We'll see what God does.
True that. Well, real quickly, I just want to mention, of course, Ion Layer. I remembered to wear my patch
Same
today.
here.
So look at those guns.
NAD.
So I'm not going to show
all
you mine
day.
because it's on my love handle. So
Please don't.
I won't.
Please don't.
You love them. You can go to ionlayer.com, put Apologia in the coupon code, and get your first month. No, that's the wrong thing. You get a sweet discount. The other thing that they're doing now is the glutathione patches. We've been talking about that. So you can also go there and put, it's Apologia, right, in the coupon code, and you get, I'm looking for the, there it is. You get $100 off.
Highlighted section there.
$100 off your first kit. So love those guys. They've been great ministry partners, and their products are incredible. All that to say, let's go ahead and bring in our guest, Pastor Michael Foster. What's up, brother?
Hey guys, how's it going? I got a bit of a cold, so I might be coughing on and off through here. I'll do my best.
It's okay. We'll forgive you.
Thanks.
Thank you, though, seriously, for jumping on last minute. It seriously worked out perfect because you had something you just got done with, and we're getting ready to start. So it worked great.
Even like last time Michael was here in Arizona too, he wasn't even here having anything to do with Apologia, but he might have been actually. He was at the studio.
He's doing
hanging
cultish,
out.
I think, right?
Yeah, that's right. He took off and he's like, "Hey, hit me up if you want to do something else." And so I was like, "Well, let's take advantage of that." And so we did "It's Good to Be a Man, End Abortion Now" collaboration there. Put that out. Just a conversation that we had about biblical masculinity and how it relates to the life issue and abortion. So I really enjoyed that conversation. It's up on our channel. Take a look. A lot of great insight there and application to that injustice. And here we are again, Michael making time for us out of Ohio.
Yeah, you wrote a book, huh?
I did. Me and my friend, non-tenant, co-authored it together, and I think that was about 3 years ago. Published it with Canon, and I thought we might sell 1,000 copies or 2,000, and I was excited about that. And we sold way more than that, and it took off, and it's been a fun ride. Glad to be able to write something that helps some people.
Yeah, right on. Well, tell us about for those that aren't familiar with the book, tell us, what it's about, why you wrote it. I'm curious, actually, like what led you into writing that. So.
Yeah. So I was a youth pastor for a while and had a fairly large youth group, and I'm sure hundreds of kids came through it. And like a decade after that, they're calling me up. They're in their mid-20s now, trying to get married. There's a lot of guys. Like, I'm having trouble connecting with women. I'm having trouble, finding a suitable spouse. All these sorts of conversations that young people are working through. And they were telling me about just how things had changed so much. And at first, I thought they're just kind of being babies, and it's always been rough. But the internet really did change dating forever. Like the dating apps, if you go look at how people meet each other, it's shifted from, like, the number one way people met each other for a long time was through mutual friends. But now it's a lot of these marriages are happening almost entirely through connection on dating apps, or you hear more and more about people like meeting through playing like video games, and they're in those communities or whatever. But this was in the thick of the switch. That would have been right around 2013, 2014. It was also right around the time that Jordan Peterson started showing up a little bit. That's pretty gaining ground. And so suddenly I have these young men that have looked to me, listening to Jordan Peterson, and then they introduced me to the world of pickup artists, which I knew what the word meant, but it's not a world. I've been married for a long time. I got a lot of kids. It's not a world I've cared about. But so I'm like, why are these Christian men listening to this Jungian psychologist and these pickup artists? So that leads me to the world of the red pill. And that word's meant a lot of different things over the ages, kind of had a sort of political application. But also it referred to the manosphere, which was like a collection of blogs and influencers and YouTube channels and Reddit and subreddits, where they're talking about positive masculinity and aware of of the evil of feminism, right? And it was a real mixed bag, right? Some of that stuff was helpful, practical in a way that you wouldn't find a lot of evangelical churches. A lot of evangelical churches are functionally androgynous, where like you don't need to be a man or be a woman, you need to be godly, right? You need to be holy. That's all that matters. But of course, like our sexual identity or which our sexuality is who we are. That's a big part. You are either a man or a woman. That's part of God's good design. So I'm reading all this stuff, and I've had a long interest in human sexuality and written on it for a long time. And I start thinking I'm going to start addressing this. And then my friend Non-Tenant, he and I argue a lot over Nephilim and stuff, just as friends do. You know, like, what's going on, man? Well, it's like, you want to argue about Nephilim? And so then I noticed on his blog that he was interacting with some of these ideas at the same time. And I started a page on Facebook called It's Good to Be a Man. The reason that page existed is me and my wife we used to run about 2 miles together. In the halfway point, we stopped in front of the Goodman's house. We were in South Carolina. And I don't know why, I'd always just think it's good to be a man when I got there. And I thought that's quite catchy. So it's hilarious. I was told that I named the book It's Good to Be a Man to be edgy, but it was actually the opposite. It was the opposite was like, let's go with something positive. Not that it's bad to be a woman or why feminism's terrible or anything like that. I was like, it's good to be a man. You can tell that we live in a depraved age where it's a zero-sum game. If it's good to be a man, that means it's bad to be a woman, right? That's a flawed logic. So Non and I start creating content, just little Facebook posts, and then we started podcasts. And the goal was to have a much more systematic approach to male sexuality, you know. But as we talked to a lot of these guys, we realized it needed to be more of a just primer to get them moving the right direction. And It's Good to Be a Man project turned into this book that was like, let's talk about how masculinity was kind of lost, both spiritually and then culturally at a broad view. And then how do we regain it through the gospel? And what does that look like once you're born again, practically living that out in a holy way? And that's how the project came together. That's kind of the overall context. So we were speaking to the red pill, but we're like a good apologist does, you enter in to that worldview and kind of dismantle it. Here's where it's good, and here's where it falls short of reality and biblical truth. So I think the book is pretty aware of that. At the very end, I told Non that I thought this whole manosphere thing was going to fall apart and that we needed to go through and rip out as many of the red pill manosphere references as we could. And we did. We removed like 80% of them. Wow. And we left a few there that we thought were relevant. And I'm glad we did that because it really has blown up in the last 2 years, certainly in the last 18 months, kind of fallen apart. And so yeah, that's how the project came about. We stopped with episode 75 and with the book and kind of on to other things now.
Right on, man. Well, I know it's been a huge blessing. I mean, we're actually going through, I just told Michael before we started, but we're going through it with our biblical manhood class at church. So it's been super encouraging to take the young dudes through that. So, awesome. I mean, the timing of this worked out well for a number of reasons. This seems to be the flavor of the week on X right now. At least the last week or so is just every time you open up X, it's, somebody spouting off about biblical masculinity and what they think it looks like, and Andrew Tate, whether or not he's a good role model, and which he's not. Let me be clear, he's not. And so, there's just been a lot of stuff, and I've seen Michael on there a bunch saying some really balanced things, and to me, that is the crux of the issue is balance. And there's a lot of dudes becoming unbalanced in either direction. Either it's too much focus on the physical aspect of being a man, or the other side, it's too much focus on the spiritual side. And I think, and I'm going to let you speak here in a second, but for me, and this is something I've been trying to do with my little show Yesterday Was Easy, was constantly attack this conversation. What does biblical masculinity look like? Coming to it balanced, right? So I like to use Voddie's 4Ps. So of biblical masculinity. So a husband, a father should be a provider, protector, priest, prophet. And I feel like that's a very balanced approach, and I like those four roles because I believe they're grounded in scripture, right? So they're based on biblical principles. And I feel like that's a very biblical or balanced approach to biblical masculinity. And we'll get more into that, but I just want to lay out that just kind of start the conversation. So I see you nodding, Michael. So I want you to jump in there.
Sure. Well, so we're in a time of correction, and times of correction always have degrees of overcorrection, right?
Yes.
Pendulum swings a bit too far or whatever. And so what I'd urge a lot of people to do is to have a little patience with one another. So first off, in defense of older men, let me give a defense for older men. And at the same time, maybe I give them a few zingers. But we've experienced a cultural tsunami. So you've had these waves of destruction come through our culture, and really intensely in the late 50s with guys like Alfred Kinsey, very evil man. And he created his different reports on human sexuality that went on to influence a lot of our educational methods, a lot of the ways things are set up in the government, whatever. Those things kind of leaked their way out into the 60s, and the 60s is a very rough decade, a decade where we have birth control introduced towards the very end of the decade, hormonal birth control, and no-fault divorce in California underneath Reagan, and all right around 69. Then, as you guys know more than anyone else, that was prepping the way for child slaughter, right, for murder. So then through the 70s, we have that really take off. By the 80s, we're seeing divorce happening at higher rates than ever before. Even in the 80s, it was pretty rare. I'm 44, so it was pretty rare in my kindergarten class or first grade class for anyone to have divorced parents. Maybe 2 or 3 kids, not a lot. And now that exponentially increases. At the same time, you're having the introduction of Ritalin, methylphenidate, all these different sort of drugs used to pacify boys and educate young boys like as if they're girls. I am a homeschooling father, and I got to tell you, like homeschooling like little girls is so much different than like 9-year-old, 10-year-old boys that you just want to, choke sometimes. The little girls just like, Daddy, look, here's my homework. Look what I'm learning. Let me recite my homework. And my boys are like, can I go outside or can I play video games? Like the girls are just all attentive. So we're using drugs to kind of pacify boys, to make them into little girls. Divorce is breaking down. Feminism is rising up. You have kind of the fallout of radical feminism with Shulamith Firestone, Betty Friedan, all these sort of people. And all that's reaching its cultural zenith just as the internet comes. Internet's introduced. And in the internet, as that's introduced, you have pornography that's easy to get. If you wanted porn back in the old days, if you wanted to have illicit sex, you had to go to the bad part of town with a really bad woman, right?
Yeah.
You had to go to the red area or whatever. Or you had to take the risk to order like something to be sent to your house in a brown paper bag or something like that.
Yeah.
Or you had to go to your uncle's house, go underneath his bed, get the VHS, sneak it out, watch it, bring it back before uncle figures out or whatever. Now you could get online and look at pornography. Like now you can stumble on pornography with ease. Like, and the other thing you have is you have the ubiquity of cell phones, which actually there's some weird correlation between girls adopting pornography and the use of cell phones that happens around the same time. That there's something going on there, that there's just a real clear correlation. Correlation is equal causation. But that enters in, and that's right at the 2000s where you have sexting being something people are talking about. Then you have the introduction of eHarmony. Early eHarmony was actually very successful at matching people because it was not just about romance in itself, but it was about how much you were alike. And it was really qualitative. But as you move towards dating apps. The dating apps are designed to favor women because guys come to them more than anything, and then that really changes the nature of dating, where it becomes even more like I think dating apps and Instagram have done to women what pornography and sports betting has done to men, right? And so that's all happening right then, okay? So the world that we knew, I was talking to the old Joe Moorcraft once on the phone. I was talking to Joe, and Joe was telling me he took these young guys out to where he has breakfast, and these young guys, he wanted to introduce them to his waitress because she's this beautiful, stunning woman. And he said he brought them out there, and the guys were like really shy and unwilling to talk to this girl who's their same age. And he's like, I'm just frustrated. I tried, and they're on their own now, and Joe in his very Southern way. But I think what these older men don't realize is something that was part of your culture has been wiped away, right? So the tsunami wave came in and it pulled that all out to sea, right? Men used to know how to make eye contact, how to shake hands. There used to be a sort of social understanding that got changed. The pollution of erotic sexuality pouring all throughout our culture. Let me just point this out. This seems a little gross. I hate to say this, but why exactly do girl mannequins need nipples on them? What's that about? I remember when their mannequins were mannequins, right? And then one day, it may have been Target, it may have been Kohl's. I can't remember.
Thought about that.
But I looked at it, I was like, why? Why is there a nipple? Who cares? And everything's is the whole pornification of society. So here we are. Men are told that they're bad women and they should be more like women. Their minds are corrupted by pornography. They've been drugged up. They've been distracted by video games of whatever sort. And then they can't get ahead on dating apps. Only the top 10% guys, this is what they tell themselves at least, are getting all the girls or whatever. And then these men say, your problem is you just don't man up. And so if you're growing up there's two different environments here. Those older men, why should they don't understand that because that's not their environment. So guys are hating these old men like, well, you should know why. I remember I had a friend once that told me that he was really mad at his church because he had this autistic daughter who was beautiful and autistic, and she was like sleeping 2 hours a night and waking up and walking out the house and getting out of the locks and all this stuff. And he was mad that his church didn't understand that. And I was like, why exactly do you think your church leadership should understand that? I don't understand that. I don't have kids that don't sleep during the night and are always trying to escape from the house. That's your personal experience. I don't get that. So I think you have two generations, or maybe a couple generations, that have very different upbringings and points of reference that are talking past each other, and in a way that's not been helpful. And I think that's what's going on online. And in the 3 Ps, I like 3 Ps, right? Protect, preside, and protect, preside, and provide. Right.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So those are like, all those other things are true too. But I like those, and you can learn from older people, and I wish they would do that. But it's kind of a knockout, drag out war between people talking past each other. So I'm not willing to give up on my older mentors. I've gotten to where I am because of good boomers, and when they say something that you cringe. Like I've teased my kids all the time, right? Skibbity toilet, Ohio, Riz, all that nonsense, right? Anything I can do to make them feel uncomfortable, I do.
Sadly, I know those terms.
Yeah, I don't know any of those. I don't even know what those things mean. I don't care. But I thought Good Morning King was kind of nerdy when I saw everyone saying that, and I was like, this will pass too. I've been there. I've done this. But I think boomers have helped me greatly. I do think there's a lot of people that don't understand just how traumatic it is growing up in a culture that rips babies up into pieces, that your first sexual experience is 9 years old watching a girl being choked
Yeah.
in pornography and being drugged your whole life and told that you're bad. Not just that you're bad and sinful, but you being a man is bad. There is something wrong with masculinity. Masculinity, matter of fact, is kind of like uranium, right? It's toxic, it's bad. And so that's what we're dealing with. So I say, pull back the rhetoric as much as you can on both sides, and we should be working together.
Yeah.
Again, so like the devil wants to put the genders or the sexes at odds, and he wants to put the generations at odds. It is the Spirit of God that unites the fathers to the son and the sons to the father. It is only the spirit of the age and of evil that divides them. And I think that should be the way that should undergird this conversation.
That's really
I appreciate that. And just for clarity, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you're using the term boomer as an age group, not as a pejorative. Because there's I hate that I have to say that, but there's a lot of people right now that are throwing that term around like it's a bad thing and is using it to.
Yeah. So Zoomers, so I look at millennials as the weakest generation I've ever seen in my entire life. I mean, they are pathetic.
I'm in agreement.
And
is that you?
That's me. Yeah.
Sorry,
that's all right.
Except for Zach.
And then I look at this younger generation that's rising up, and they're not PCA at all. They seem really driven and motivated. But every generation is going to have its kind of sets of sins that outer circumstances thrust upon them, their own weaknesses. And one way to think about it is granddad will have problems that he'll have to repent to dad about. And dad will have to repent to you, son. And son, grandson, you'll have to repent to them. Each generation is going to have their faults and problems and whatever. So if we're speaking about broad generalities across generations, I think it's helpful, but I have people that say, okay, boomer to me, and they're just idiots. And I don't take it personally. And they don't know what they're talking about. So I'm just speaking of the boomer generation that grew up really at the height of post-war American culture, where we had a great financial system. Marriage was still celebrated. It was before abortion had really wrecked us. That was a good time in America. And these people resent them for that. Isn't that the good time? Something like that you want to give to your own children? And look, we all play the hands that God deals to us, and we'll have plenty to repent about. So you can hate on boomers, but I'm just thinking I'm going to try not to make the same mistakes and be ready to repent to my own children.
I just think that's such a helpful way to provide balance, because that's what you see in the conversations that are happening online and elsewhere is a talking past each other. And, you have the older generation that has their own, I think, way that they're talking past the youngers and vice versa. And the question becomes, like, how do we reconcile this? Like, the young men that are really, really left with this vacuum that the culture has filled for them, and the Absaloms of this world, as Michael talks about in his book, like, you want to relate and be sympathetic towards their unique struggles that are present in this generation. So that has to be there. And at the same time, they have to be called upward and to rise above it, but in a way that's sympathetic to their struggles. Also, not just telling them to get lost because they don't know what real struggle actually is. Like this generation had to endure. You guys have it so well. I think some of it discounts some of the historical context that Michael's laying down here, but at the same time, you have the tendency, again, the overcorrection on the other end of the spectrum for the younger generation to say, well, you guys ruined everything. You handed us a broken world. You didn't take your responsibility and leave us anything. You're the problem. And so step aside. We're going to step in, and we're going to be assertive, and we're going to take over this now, and we don't need you. Thanks for nothing, right? And so you kind of have this disrespectful, even in some extreme cases, entitled, right? So they're wanting something that, they haven't necessarily put in the work to achieve and acquire. So as I think about this too, I think about there is a vacuum that has been filled by the world because there's been an absence of some of the godly masculinity modeled. And that's where you get to transition to this now, the Andrew Tates of the world, the manosphere, the red pill, because men are starved for that practical instruction.
Sure. Yeah.
Right? They're looking to have the principles modeled out of how to live what we would call this gendered piety, right? In the Christian church, it's like, okay, it's a little androgynous here, and we don't know, these sex-specific ways to live out our God-given design. And we're not seeing these examples. We're actually seeing an effeminate church. So now we're not getting it here. We're going to turn towards these people that do relate to our struggles, that we think are willing to listen to us. And Mike, I'd love to have you talk just for a minute about, in Scripture, the Absaloms that are willing to do that and are willing to take these young men and sort of pat them on the shoulder.
So in Scripture, in Hebrews, we're told that a father who cares about even an ungodly father or an unbelieving father disciplines the son that carries his name, right? And he does it as seems best to him, and God disciplines us likewise. And part of our chastening is proof that we belong to the Lord, that he cares about us. Yeah. So discipline is a form of love, and the discipline of a benevolent father is one of the most formative things you could ever have in your life. Evidence of that is through the first 14 chapters of Proverbs. Over and over again, Solomon says, my son, give me your heart, listen to my teaching, right? And it's so much of it's like, don't be a fool, be wise, receive correction, listen to your mom, on and on and on. And as a dad, I correct my kids all the time. I have hard conversations. Discipline is pain you bring into your children's life. Sometimes it's a swat on the butt, but sometimes it's telling them things they don't want to hear. And a dad is willing to say those hard things. If you grow up without a dad, without being properly disciplined, you're going to have resentment towards your father you don't fully understand. Or if your father falls short or whatever. Now, in modern culture, that tends to produce either the effeminate man who adopts really the attributes that would be attractive in his mother, but are not attractive in him, right? Men deal with things much more directly than women. That's natural. If a woman says, it sure is cold in here, that's woman for get me a blanket. And guys say, give me a blanket. That's what we say. Guys are very direct. It's very content, a linear sort of speech, where women are more contextual, kind of spinning around speech. And both make a lot of sense given what they're trying to do. Neither is different. Nonetheless, guys that they'll adopt that sort of effeminate, hide behind another guy instead of being the one to race out there. Like if a woman wakes up in the middle of the night and there's a bump downstairs, the husband doesn't say, hey, will you go see what that is? Right? That's what a man's supposed to do. So there's that effeminate. Then there's the macho, which is this flip side, where he doesn't really know what it means to be a man. So he looks from far off at sort of cultural avatars of masculinity, whether it's Dirty Harry or Andrew Tate or whatever, depending on that age bracket. And then he acts that out. And it's very cardboard. It's very exaggerated. So effeminate men, macho men in that context are kind of like two sides of the same coin. And it's because they did not have a father who knows how to demonstrate strength under control, right?
Meekness.
So gentle, meekness. So gentle is a very important thing that a man has to understand, because we're powerful. We're big and strong. And that's why you can have a guy like Zuby go out there and beat the world champion deadlift for a woman like it's nothing. You know what I mean? We're just bigger. So gentleness is the appropriate use of strength in the context. If I just toss a bag of potatoes in the back of my minivan, that is gentle. They're potatoes. They'll be fine. If I throw a lamp in there the same way, that's not gentle, right? So guys have to learn how to use strength, how to use their presence and all that. You learn that mostly through examples. If you don't have a dad that's giving a good example and correcting you, you don't have that. And that leads to a sort of resentment towards your father. When we look at Absalom, he has a dad who is a pretty good king, a pretty good warrior, but a really bad at disciplining family members. Whether it's his sons or even Joab, right? Think of it like what Joab was a huge trouble, especially towards the end of his life. So then Absalom has a real legitimate beef with his dad due to the sexual abuse of his sister. And that grows into a deep resentment towards his dad. And he decides that he's going to steal his father's kingdom. And he's going to sit outside, and anyone that comes in at the gates, he's like, tell me your case. I got your back. I care about you, not like the other guys. And then that leads to stealing the hearts of the young men away. And then he's going to take over the entire kingdom. And what's interesting in these spiritual Absaloms, the son version that resents their dad not disciplining them, to get their dad's kingdom, they have to kill him. They think that kingdom belongs to them and it should just be handed over, right? And so in Absalom, you have an example of two things. One, you have an example of someone that steals the hearts away from people by pretending to have their cause. That's who Andrew Tate is, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's who a lot of these influencers are. Guys like Jordan Peterson early on certainly cared about young men. These days, it's so hard to know with that guy. He's just influence. Celebrity is really a corrosive force. But another thing I see is that there's a whole group of young men that have not been disciplined by their fathers, and they have this patricidal inclination that to get the kingdom, they have to kill their father. And so it was very fascinating to watch how much hatred Doug Wilson and James White has gotten on Twitter the last couple of months. Right. Someone was like, do you care to comment on it? And I was like, I would not. Thanks
for asking.
I would like to. I have a lot of other things to do, but I will comment it on here because I didn't get much of that hate. Now, what's the difference? Well, I'm 44. I'm like an older brother. I'm like an older uncle or something like that. And I understand the world a little bit better. But Doug and James have been sort of pictures of fatherhood to these men. And when they don't feel like their father gets them, that builds up a lot of resentment. But in some of these men, I think there's a sort of Absalomic drive to sit down, Dad, it's time to give me the keys.
Right.
Okay?
Right. Yeah.
Now listen, it may be time for a member of the older generation to sit down, but that doesn't mean those keys belong to you. Okay? Like one of my big drives in life is to raise up a successor and retire before, I don't know what it is about men, but they reach a certain age and they get bumpy. I'll just say I've dealt with it in multiple organizations. And so as I look at what's going on, I see the Absalom like Tate really saying, look what they took from you and I'm for you and yada, yada, yada. Like the look that what they took from you is such a sort of embittering, I guess if we're going to take it back, I get it. But all this embittering stuff, they embitter people towards their father. And that brings out the worst in men that haven't been disciplined. And they're like, I'm going to destroy you. If you don't give it to me, I'm going to destroy you. I'm going to take you down. And so that's a lot of the weird cultural play. What I hate about Twitter with this whole thing is everyone's so reductionistic or like reducing this down to like Tate bad. They won't even ask why Tate appeals to young men.
Yeah.
Well, it's just because young men like hot women in cars. Okay. Why? Why do young men? Is that a new thing? Did Tate curate that in young men? You're like, young men have liked beautiful women in cars for a long time. Why do they like cars? Well, it's a status symbol. Why do they like beautiful women? Because they're pretty, and God made us to like the opposite sex. So what's happening is you're seeing people accentuate some natural desires that have been twisted by sin and using that to market themselves to get into your pocket, right? And that's what Tate is. Tate has been a bunch of things. Mm-hmm. Guy's always shifting, right? First, he was when it was the masculinity height of the red pill days. He's super crude and all that, and that was really selling at that time. And now, as things are kind of becoming more about let's reclaim the West and tradcath and Eastern, like this sort of more moralistic, he's changed his pitch, right? Mm-hmm. So he's a salesman. He's a charlatan, but some of the things he talks about resonates with men because they're masculine desires that have been twisted by sin.
Yeah.
It is not wrong to want to make money because it is not wrong to want to provide for others.
Sure.
Right? You don't seek to be rich, you seek to be productive. Right? It is not wrong to want to have a beautiful wife. It is wrong to want to have beautiful women, right?
Sure.
All to yourself. It is not wrong to want to have status because it's a good thing to aspire to the office of elder. It's a good thing to aspire to status and use power for the good of others and the glory of God. But all this is like, it's all being twisted. And then there's the game that people play, the content farming rage bait on Twitter that people fall for. And that's kind of what's going on Twitter. The main thing to remember, as I go on a rant, the main thing to remember is Twitter is not real.
Right.
The Eastern Orthodox Church is growing, but it's not this huge growth like you think it is on Twitter, right? I hear all these guys, you guys are alienating all the young men. A lot of these guys are like in their late 20s, early 30s. Like, since when is that a young man?
Yeah.
Like, it is in one sense,
Yeah.
but like, these aren't like 20-year-olds. And also, guys, I think there's not a lot of reformed young men, period. Like, the largest reformed denomination in America is the PCA. And that's a little about 350 to 400,000 people. That's not even a percent of America. It's not even a percent. This is a very small echo chamber on Twitter.
Right.
That you gotta, as the kids said, touch grass, right, to figure out what's going on. So I don't know. There you go. No prep. I hope that's
no.
There's some folks in there.
Super helpful. I really appreciate that. And
Yeah.
for the record, we're being accused of gaslighting for mentioning Andrew Tate. It's like, no, I brought him up. I'm the one that brought him up because that's the name getting thrown around on X every time.
What's the gaslighting? How are we gaslighting talking about Andrew Tate? I don't understand.
Because apparently we're gaslighting because we're saying that people are promoting him as, and no one's ever said that. I just said he's not a good role model. That's all it is. So I didn't accuse anyone of promoting him as a good role model.
So what's going on is
making
people,
a statement. Go ahead.
People are not promoting Andrew Tate, the man, but they are promoting aspects of his message and not carefully explaining that. Now, we grew up during the gospel-centered times in a world of nuance where people would nuance things that didn't mean anything. That doesn't mean nuance doesn't matter. The Bible says there is no God. The fool in his heart says there is no God, right? You have to properly qualify things. But qualified statements, I do them all the time. Qualified statements don't get engagement. When I qualify things on Twitter, and so people are being really sloppy in what they're saying, and there are people out there that aren't willing to just say, yeah, Andrew Tate's a bad dude, but this message, aspects of it relate, right? I basically said, I had some of these unreasonable people on the other side come at me because I said, look, I had a lot of young homeschool kids bring up Andrew Tate to me. And I basically said, yeah, feminism's poison. Now let me show you the biblical way. And these guys said to me, well, why are you bringing up Andrew Tate? I'm not bringing up Andrew Tate. Well, how do they even know about Andrew Tate? Because they have the internet. Well, their parents shouldn't give them the internet. Well, they have neighborhood kids too that have phones. Well, I just don't think they should see Andrew Tate. Well, so what? There's billions of views. Well, isn't there another way to talk about the good of biblical masculinity rather than bringing up Andrew Tate? Brother, I didn't bring up Andrew Tate. I said he's right that feminism is poison. Let me show you what the Bible means. So that's the flip side. There's other people where if Jeffrey Dahmer tells you not to kill people, that doesn't make killing people right because he ate folk. Right? Andrew Tate saying something right, it's still right. But they're not willing to say Andrew Tate's wrong in areas because they think that's some sort of compromise. Right. And it doesn't have to be. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it doesn't. And I appreciate that. And in Feckless Cowboy, he's the one making these comments. Let me clarify what I was saying. Because I didn't have your thing right in front of me. He's saying that we're accusing people of defending Andrew Tate. And what I'm saying is that I'm seeing a lot of people saying, well, what you literally just said, Michael, like he's saying good things here, and here. And so that's, attracting Christian men because these things that he's saying are good, but like you said, they're not willing to completely denounce the man for all the awful, awful things he's saying. This seems to be a trend on a number of levels the last few months, whether it's, anti-Semites. I'm trying not to go down that road. But my point is there seems to be a trend of this lately of, well, this guy, Corey Mailer, I'll bring him up. We've talked about him, Stone Choir. They say some really good things here about history, but we're going to ignore the really awful things that he's saying also. And so it troubles me when we're willing to defend guys for some good things they say, but not completely denounce them when they're actually really evil, vile people. And that's what we're getting at. And again, I brought the name up because it's been all over X the last 2 weeks. That's the only reason I brought his name up. I'll be honest, I've never watched anything of Andrew Tate's. Okay, so I don't know. I'm leaning on Michael right now because Michael obviously is very knowledgeable about some of the stuff he's saying. So I've seen some things he said, but I've never sat down and actually watched any of his videos. But there's a theme here, right, that we're trying to address. Yeah. You look like you're gonna say something.
Go ahead, Sam.
I was just gonna say too, in regards to his worldview, which is taken several shifts depending upon its influences and kind of reinventing itself as his focuses are changing. Now he's professing to be a Muslim. So his perspective on life can't be divorced from his fundamental worldview too. And that's also how we have to think about these things too, is the people that are influencing our young people, like we have to be willing to take apart their worldview also and examine it and educate our youth and to say, yeah, these things are attractive to young men for a reason, and not just because they're inherently sinful. Like, as it's been pointed out, these things aren't inherently sinful. It's not wrong for a man to have ambition. It's not wrong for him to want to get strong and to perform well and to excel at his craft or his work. It's not wrong for him to want to have a wife. These are natural desires that are good. The problem is because someone has a different worldview that is fundamentally antithetical to the Christian worldview and the gospel, that will always be corrupted and polluted and perverted into something that is unrecognizable and destructive. We recognize it in the sense that it doesn't have a good end. Like, it won't end up. Andrew Tate is going to take you to an end that you don't want to go to.
Right.
Even though he is, by common grace, stumbling over things that are natural to what men and males desire.
Yeah.
Right? Even though that is an aspect of what God created us to be as image bearers, to fill, to subdue, to take dominion over the earth, to multiply, all of the Genesis things. That's what we have to understand, is that he doesn't share your foundations at all. And that is not taking you to a place that you want to go. Hence why we need good, godly Christian men to walk out these virtues, because as Michael says in his book, this is one thing I appreciate about what you said, though these things be natural that the Absaloms are modeling, that does not make them virtuous.
Yeah.
Maybe you could fill that out in a sec.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
So homosexuality is sinful and unnatural, right? So that's one of the arguments Paul makes against it. It goes against nature. Is actually not present in nature. You'll hear people say that, but that's usually a way of showing dominance. It's not merely lust or something like that in animals. It's unnatural. Heterosexuality is always natural. It's natural in like a man is made for a woman is made for a man. Heterosexual sex is natural in that right parts are going in the right places and it will achieve the design, at least at the level of procreation for which it was made. But that doesn't mean all heterosexual sex is good, right? It's only like there's that act in marriage is good and natural. That act outside of marriage is still natural in that sense, but it's evil because it's being used outside of its purpose. So it's like fire. Fire is good inside the walls of an engine or in a fireplace. That's where it belongs. You take the fire out of the fireplace, burns the whole house down, right? And so you have to understand there are things that are natural, like patriarchy. Patriarchy, men have been in charge the whole time, and they still are, by and large. So that is a natural thing, and it's inevitable, and you can't avoid it. Does that mean all patriarchs are good. Well, of course it doesn't, because one patriarch we have that is a patriarch in the sense that he models a certain fatherhood is the devil. He's the father of lies. We have evil patriarchs like Pharaoh. So the fact that they rule is natural, but that doesn't mean the way that they rule is godly. And so I think that's where a lot of this conversation goes wrong, is that we're not able to interact with like natural desires and call them like it's good that a man would desire a woman, but he has to desire for the right purposes and in the right way, but that he feels attraction. Like testosterone that makes men more aggressive is not a product of the fall. Right. But it is one of the reasons 80% of all violent offenders are men, is because we have testosterone and it makes you more aggressive. That's like part of it. Men aren't more fallen, but there's a design difference. Well, that aggressiveness, when channeled and aimed the right way by the grace of God, is a glorious thing for building things, for protecting, for having bold preaching of the gospel and leadership and all that. And so as I'm watching these conversations, if we could just kind of hold in tension the fact that that grace does restore nature, it doesn't obliterate it, and it doesn't lift it above its original design like you would kind of have in a more Eastern Orthodox way of thinking, but it does restore it. And that's being used in kind of playful ways online right now to say something other than what it means. But
Right,
at
I've seen that.
this level, it's very helpful, you know.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that very, very much. And I will say, it's crazy because when did you say you wrote the book? About 3 or 4 years ago?
I think it was 3 years ago.
Yeah, that's about the time. Actually, it was 3 years ago. It's about the time I started noticing men in our own church, and it's the same demographic, right? It's dudes like mid-30s ish into their 20s saying, "Hey, we need help. I need more discipleship. I need to know how to be a better dad and father." And so, like, for the record, like, I see it. It's there. You know, I personally have been doing my best the last 3 years to address this in my own body, and now I'm trying to do it. You know, like I said, through Yesterday Was Easy. Like, I see it, and the thing is, we need to address it with good biblical examples, right?
Yeah.
And that's the whole thing we're trying to get to here. Is we can't. And I understand why dudes are attracted to Andrew Tate. I get that, but we need to respond and say these are the biblical principles we should be abiding by. These are the examples. Look at these men in Scripture. This is who we should be emulating, or even men that we know that may be boomers. Right? I know a lot of boomers that are fantastic godly men I've learned a lot from, and I want to be more like them. Right? Like, so we should be promoting them. And what we shouldn't be saying is, you know, like you were saying, like you're a boomer, shut up. Like, and I'm seeing a lot of that, and I'm seeing this. Well, the reason that men are attracted to Andrew Tate is because there's no one in the church it's like, no, stop. Why would you say that's not true?
Kind of those broad and sweeping generalizations.
Yes, and so
I had some young people telling me that I've been quiet about these issues. I haven't been involved. And since when have I ever spoken on parental rights and the problem with no-fault divorce? Before almost everybody in this conversation, I was actively online talking about that. Now, I don't want some pat on the back, but I've been in this conversation for a long time, and I've been pushing those things out. And I haven't been talking about them as much lately because I am a pastor. And I have all sorts of responsibilities. I'm a bivocational pastor. And just because I'm not engaging in all the hot trends, but it's hilarious to have some person come on and say, well, what do you know about speaking publicly about feminism, especially it's an anon account, which I'm like, look, I'm fine with you having an anonymous account, but I'm out here putting my neck out publicly. And that's a choice I've made, and I can live with it. But a lot of these guys just don't know. Here's some notes I took for a category of, I don't know if this has ever been released, but I'll walk you through it. So I have this category of men that I call alpha gurus. That's what I call them. And alpha gurus are pseudo fathers who posture themselves as heroic figures to whom you owe your life, or at least your unquestioned loyalty. After all, before you came to them, you were lost and or confused, or so they think and act, right? I call them alpha gurus because they posture themselves as models of masculine masteries. And maybe they do have some masculine skills, but they lack the mindset and ambitions of a father. Fathers want you to master yourself. Alpha gurus want to master you. Fathers discipline you towards your good. Alpha gurus discipline you towards their goals. Fathers want you to grow into a peer and eventually even eclipse them. An alpha guru wants you to remain a devotee and never outdo them in anything. Fathers want you to be your own man on your own mission that is keeping with the discipline and ethics that they passed on to you, namely scripture. Alpha gurus want you to be one of their guys who help them manage their mission to which they've called you. Fathers use their gravitas to stabilize and launch the next generation into new frontiers for the glory of God. Alpha gurus, gravitas is more like a gravitational pull of a black hole that pulls you into it. So we need fathers, not alpha gurus. That's
fantastic.
What's the difference between these guys? They're not fathers. They're not fathers. No, there's no fathers in the church. Guys, get off the internet a little bit. Like, I'm not talking down to you. I'm not a boomer. I'm telling you right now, so many good pastors are just busy being pastors. They don't have a podcast. I've been podcasting because it's exhausting. Like, I can't keep up with all that stuff. And I want to produce good content, but I've taken a long break because I'm like, I kind of sick of all of it. And I'd rather be a real shepherd. And I have all these guys telling me, oh, young men are doing terrible and they're not able to get married. Look, I believe that at a general level. But we are having wedding after wedding at East River, and we're having lots of babies. There's kids everywhere, right? And these men are building their careers and they're doing awesome things. I was out there at Phoenix. I visited Mark's church, Driscoll's church, and I see what's happening over there. I've never been to a service at your guys' church, but there's good stuff happening everywhere, even in no-name churches with good men.
Uh-huh.
And people say, well, it's hard to find good churches. You have my sympathies. That is very true. It's an age of apostasy, an age of compromise, but don't let the internet merchants of misery, black pill you, right? Black pill you into believing that they're the only ones that can help you. They're the only voice that you can trust. It's not true. It's a lie from the devil. Anyone that does that is an Absalom. They're an alpha guru. They're using you. You are the prey. They are the predators. I will tell you, as someone who kills predators for a living as a shepherd, that there are a lot of good men out there. And we just have to keep pulling these guys back. You just have to ride out their anger. Just like a good dad rides out the anger of his son. Talking down to him online is not going to help.
Right.
You can do what you want. That's your replies, not mine. I'm not going to deal with that. But that's where we're at right now.
Man, I appreciate that. I know you only got a few more minutes. Yeah. How many minutes do you have left? Because I want to bring up something else.
20. I can do another.
Good. Okay.
Yeah.
So one last thing, and we'll close on here because this is something that drives me nuts. I've been talking about a lot as well, and I wore this shirt on purpose today. Like, there is a major issue with victimhood within this. I'm not gonna say it's not. Boomers aren't guilty as well. Like. Again, I'm not saying that as a pejorative. Feckless cowboy, no, I disagree with what you said. It's being used as a pejorative, and that's why men of that age range are upset. But this demographic, I'm seeing this as a major problem. I've talked about this a lot. It's like, it's just this, well, hey, brother, you shouldn't be, why aren't you denouncing Andrew Tate? Stop gaslighting me. How's that gaslighting? Hey, why aren't you denouncing Corey Mailer? Stop attacking me. You're attacking me. They're attacking him. It's like, can we stop using that word when you have men that have been around for a long time, that have a long track record of loving Jesus, of being solid pastors and theologians, and they're out of concern saying, hey, man, I think the direction you're heading is not good. Why aren't you doing this? This is not good. I'm concerned about you. I love you. I'm concerned. You're attacking me. Stop attacking me. And it's just straight victimhood, and I'm sick of it, to be honest. Like I keep saying this, it's like, Christian men, if you have a victim card, like, pull it out your wallet and go burn it right now and never use it again. And it goes all the way back to the garden. It starts there with Adam, right? Eve eats the fruit. Adam immediately pulls his victim card, right? Well, it was the woman. It's the woman you gave me. Like, dude, that's where it starts. And if we want like true biblical masculinity in our lives, get rid of your victim card. I'm done. Michael, take it.
Um, so there, people have been victimized, but that doesn't mean you get to stay a victim. And that's true of any sort of sin that's been committed towards you. Okay. You're going to have to move past that. And that doesn't mean that's not something that shapes you. It does. I grew up in a broken home. I grew up very poor, like exceedingly poor. I struggled financially all into really my late 30s, and it's been a hard go. And there's things I wasn't taught by my dad, which he's apologized to me for, and I've forgiven him because my grandfather was a cult leader and a real bad guy, and beat my dad. And my dad gave me what he got. He didn't have a lot, but he gave it to me, and he was messed up himself. And I grew up around alcoholism, gambling, molestation. Somehow, I avoided that directly, but some of my close relatives were molested by other relatives. When you grow up in a broken situation, it does shape who you are, but that doesn't give you permission to stay a victim, right? Like especially if you want to build something for the next generation.
Yeah.
Like God is a master at bringing beauty from ashes. And one of my favorite shows that Emma and I were watching for a bit is where they come in and there's these old barns that are like almost breaking, and they go in there and they take all the old wood, because the old wood is way better than modern wood. It's like this high class. And then they take the wood and they use it to build like some new house or whatever. And I think that's how God is. God takes this old wood and makes it into something new and beautiful. And I think what these guys have to understand is that even though you maybe did grow up in a broken home or a broken society, and that has cost you a lot, sitting in the ashes, that's your decision. You decided to do that, right? And I'll have so many of these people say, well, you just got lucky. Or like, there's not a lot of women out there like Emily. She's special and I love her, but she was a difficult woman to be married to. Like, I was difficult too, but that chick could get angry, right? And I remember arguing with her. I'm like, so did Jesus die on the cross for you, or did you not sin? Right? Like, getting Emily to to confess to a sin in our early marriage was hard, man. And we fought like cats and dogs, but slowly but surely, the sanctifying grace of God worked in us, and we grew. I grew as a man, I grew as a father, she grew as a woman, as a wife. We worked things out. We figured out how to budget, and we did these things. It was a rough ride, man. And I'll tell you guys, the listeners, and you guys, I suppose, as well, is that, okay, you're a victim of something real. Now what? Now what are you going to do? Yeah. You're going to let this be who you are the rest of your life? You think it's going to get easier just talking about it all the time? I've had bad things happen to me, and you see this. I remember when I had a daughter die, and my mind kept coming back to it constantly in that first year or so. And I couldn't. It was like haunting me all the time. And you bring it up. It's weird. It's a weird thing to bring up all the time. And eventually, I was able to move past it. I still love her. I care about her. I can't wait to meet her in heaven, all that sort of stuff. But these guys, the way I think about it is I think about this valley. It's like a valley you walk down into and walk out. You can walk out of. And that's how grief and pain is. It's a dark valley you walk into. And you'll meet people down at the bottom of the valley. And these people are experts about the valley. They know all about its darkness. They'll say, oh, that's happened to you. That's happened to me too. Why don't you set up camp with us? And they'll keep you at camp, right? That's not what you do. You walk through the valley of the shadow of death, right? You peer over the edge and you see that light over there. And you'll think that these guys who are experts in the pain of men, experts in the evil of feminism, are there to help you. They are if they're leading you out. But if they're getting you to set camp up in there, they are your enemies, right? They're selling misery to you. They're co-miserating with you. And I can remember we would meet these people who had also lost children. And and they only wanted to talk about their pain. And Em and I had pain. We wanted to process it, but we wanted to move on because we had other kids and we wanted to have more children, and we had to move past death through grief. And then we'd see people that just get stuck there. They just want to talk about. This one woman sent me an email and she said, "Oh, I've been reading your blogs and you're so helpful. I also lost a son and I go to his grave every day." And I was thinking, that's a little intense. So then I go look, I follow the link that she sent in the email, and her son died like 20 years ago. She's been going to her son's grave every day for 20 years. That is not healthy. So what I'd say to any of you guys that have been victims of things, like, you have to move past it. Don't set up camp in the dark bottom of the valleys with people that tell you that this is all there is. There isn't. There is more. God, by his grace, makes new. That's what God does. He makes, such were some of you. Some of you are whiners, right? Some of you are babies, but you move past, And so I think where we're at right now requires the ability to love and identify with real things and say, yeah, I hear you. That's true. However, we still have to keep moving forward. And Twitter is not a place where that's easy to accomplish.
No, it's a dumpster fire. Honestly, it's like, and we'll in here. I only recently got an X account because people were sending me all these links and I couldn't read them. So I was like, all right. So I've been fighting that for years, and so I finally got it. It's just, I hate it so much. I hate it. It's like, it's literally like N.D. Wilson described it as somebody giving a bunch of 13-year-olds Sharpies, and you're reading the bathroom stall walls in a junior high school. Like, that's like literally what it feels like sometimes. It's just so junior high at times. Like, goodness gracious, can we all like please act our age and grow up a little bit? But anyways,
it is an algorithm. It is an algorithm.
Oh, for sure.
You have to remember,
for sure,
is that sometimes you have to ask. I was thinking this the other day. I was getting all this weird like movie facts, and you're like,
right, yeah.
I was like, what's this all about? Yeah. What did I click on? What have I done to deserve this? But what I'd say is there are a lot of good people out there doing great stuff. Twitter is best for leaders that connect with. Twitter is the marketplace of ideas. Sure. Instagram is where you reach your friends. Facebook is where you get in an argument with someone you went to 6th grade with. But Twitter is a place to debate ideas, the signal boost. But it's really hard to have meaningful conversations due to the limit of it. And right now, that's where a lot of the people have drifted that I think are more animated in this issue. And it's just, remember, this is a great exaggeration. It is not what it seems to be. I know it's not. I travel extensively. I'll be in Tucson in a few days. I'm always somewhere, right? And it's not like that. There's good stuff happening. And I know you guys have been at the brunt of this fight. We're not going to do the Tate Declaration, are we? No,
hopefully that never happens.
I think hopefully after this week we'll be on to the next thing. So that's
all right. I think that's fair to say. So, but yeah, I think there's good stuff. I'm very excited about the future. We'll push through this. There'll be good men that'll say, you know what? I once was like you. I once was angry, and I was angry about real things. But by the grace of God, I've gotten over that. And look at what I've done. Look at what, praise the Lord, you can do this too. That's what we need more of.
I appreciate that, man. Seriously, I'm so thankful for you being on today. Anything you want to add?
No, that's just good stuff, man. Got a lot to meditate on.
All right, man. Well, I appreciate you, brother. Where can people go find your stuff, get your book, whatever you want?
Just Google It's Good to Be a Man. I'm sure it'll come up somewhere. And I'm on Twitter, kind of. This is possible.
You're hilarious, bro. He's just like, just file. Use Google. You'll find
it is easy.
He's got his own website. He's just like, whatever. I love it, dude. I appreciate that. You don't take yourself at all too seriously, so thank you. We need more of that for sure. But hey, man, I appreciate it. Hey, if you should come to Tucson in April to ReformCon.
No, there's no ending to conferences, my friend.
I just thought I'd throw it out.
He's like,
ReformCon 2025, April 24th, 26th.
Michael's like, I only got one trip to Tucson in me, and that's it, man.
Listen, I
only want to go there once.
I don't
appreciate you guys. I appreciate you. Thank you so much for letting me spend some time with you guys.
Yeah, man. I appreciate you're working in Ohio, right, with us for the equal protection bill.
We'll destroy it. We'll make their life miserable until they stop killing babies. We'll find a way.
Amen. I love it. Yeah. All right, brother. Well, we'll talk soon-ish. Sometime. Who knows?
Yeah. Thanks for being so gracious with your time.
Appreciate you, bro. Hope you feel better, man.
Thank you. Take care.
God bless. All right, so let's just close this out then here. We will have an after show for all accessors. Oh, there was a question. Let me pull that up.
What do we got in the comments?
Yeah, it was super chat. It's greeting brothers from Judoka 512. Would you please explain the millennium from a reform point of view, please? Bless y'all.
The millennium, like Revelation 20 millennium?
That's what that means. And there's not necessarily only one reformed view on that either. But
no, that's what I was what I was thinking is, if you want to formulate a response to this, there are differing views on when the millennium is, whether it's literal, figurative, but it comes from Revelation chapter 20. So the positions on that, you have the premillennial position, that sees it as something in the future to come, and more of the idea that it's a literal 1,000 years, or some perspectives more like ours that are the partial preterist perspective within the postmillennial camp that see it as something that is more symbolic of a number, 1,000, right? Scripture uses that language. God owns the cattle on 1,000 hills, for example. And then, amillennialism has its own perspective about the millennium, but it just depends on where you fall in your eschatology. As to whether you believe we're in it right now, or if it's an actual reign that lasts literal 1,000 years. So depending on your eschatological perspective, that's what's going to determine where you fall on that. How you answer certain questions will determine where you land.
Of course, we would say the correct answer is the post-millennial position.
Listen, Douglas Wilson says this a lot, but Revelation 20 is notorious for being the passage about the 1,000 years of peace that Christians love to fight about.
Yeah.
Which he always gets a chuckle out of. He thinks is really funny. It is funny, but I don't take too much stock in that being where I would go to show people my position.
Right.
Because let's be honest, it's really not that abundantly clear. Revelation 20. I think it's one of those passages that there's a reason that Christians have argued about it for so long. But, we'd point to other places, the Olivet Discourse, we'd point to certain language in the prophets that talk about the progress of the gospel in the world. The New Testament epistles that build on the expectation and arrival of the Messiah and what the mission of the church is. So those are, I would more gravitate towards those passages to explain what my view is on the future. And Revelation 20, not that I think it's unimportant. I just think that that's a passage that I think is less clear.
Yeah. Well, you answered that way better than I would have, so thank you. We're gonna end this show here. First, I want to point everybody to shop.apologiastudios.com where you can get these sweet tracks we've written, some precept coffee. You can get this hat and this shirt. Lots of cool swag. I've got a lot of shirts on there I've been putting up for biblical masculinity. So if you're into that sort of thing, we got some cool stuff. And of course, I want to thank, speaking of biblical men, Bill Rapier from he actually just texted me. That's funny. From Amtech Blades, you can go to amtechblades.com, put Apologia in the coupon code, get 5% off your order, and he will also match 5% to end abortion now to help us save babies. His blades are the best. Check them out. Battle axes, knives, amazing stuff. And then, of course, another biblical man is a good friend of ours, Bradley Pierce, who we tried to get on today but couldn't. He's been a busy man writing all them bills,
especially now.
All them bills, though. So he's been super busy. But anyways, Heritage Defense. I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I'm going to keep saying it until every family I know that homeschools their children is signed up with Heritage Defense. so critical, so affordable. You can go there, protect your family from 3-letter agencies, heritagedefense.org. Put Apologia in the coupon code. Get your first month free. On that note, that's all I got. And anything from you?
Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Hope that was a blessing. I know it blessed me.
Yeah, Michael's amazing. That was incredible. And we'll be back next week, hopefully with the show we were planning on doing today, which I'm very excited about. That's all I got. All accessors. See you in a few minutes at the after show. Peace.